Hi, Acadiana Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Tuesday. That was Rainy Sundays, I think was the name of that particular song by the 126ers. Doesn't really fit with today since A, it's not raining, and B, it's definitely not Sunday. It's a Tuesday here in Acadiana, and it's definitely a hot one. Most of us are under a heat advisory as those heat index values are going to be pushing 110 a little later this afternoon. Before we get to the tropic stuff, real quick, partly cloudy here in Lafayette. 91 feels like 103. That dew point right now is at 75%, and we are looking at humidity at 59%. Rather, the dew point is 75 degrees and the humidity 59%. Winds are currently out the northwest at 7. So there is a little bit of a breeze. I did take my walk this morning and felt a little bit more of a breeze, and it was actually a little drier maybe with that northerly wind. Maybe I'm splitting hairs here. As we get into August, we really tend to hate that weather forecast and look for any kind of glimmer of hope whatsoever. Radar imagery showing really nothing locally. We're in good shape there. But a little bit farther out into the offshore waters, we got a couple of showers. Got a few storms up there around Hattiesburg and points eastward there along the Florida Panhandle into Alabama and Texas, or Alabama and Florida. We're not really looking at a whole lot of organized activity right now, but as we go through time, I think we're going to see a few more showers and thunderstorms working in our direction, which hopefully will kind of break the heat that we've had here over the past several days. By the way, yesterday we only hit 94, so we still haven't even hit 95 degrees, and I have to say, over the last couple of summers, especially the summer of 2023, anything that seems, if we're not hitting 100 by the time we get to the mid part of July, it seems a little unusual. So fortunately, this time around, we're actually kind of seeing more of what we would consider a normal summer. June was right on target, and July, I believe, is just a couple of tenths of a degree below normal because of the extra rain. So we're actually experiencing a normal summer, which is something we have not seen here in a very long time. A lot of sunshine out there. It's hazy too, but there's no traffic issues, and we're going to be in good shape there. And if you're going to do some boating today, no problems either. We don't have any showers or thunderstorms, and the winds and seas are pretty decent out there. The light northwest breeze, about 5 to 10 knots, and seas running about 2 to 3 feet. So here's the big picture as we look at the U.S. We've got a couple of things that are going to be happening. We've got a ridge of high pressure that's in place right now at the surface, and that's going to kind of drift its way off toward the southwest. That's going to allow a little bit more of a trough to kind of work its way under a big upper level high that's out here creating much of the heat over the eastern half of the U.S. So we will start to see a little bit more moisture kind of working its way off toward the west here across the northern portion of the Gulf. And right now, this is just some upper level energy that's bringing some showers out over the Gulf waters. But over time, we're going to see the high-pressure ridge aloft kind of weaken a little bit, and that'll bring us some better chances for rain. But right now, beautiful day all along the northern Gulf Coast. Gorgeous turquoise waters there in Panama City Beach, working off toward the west, Orange Beach, Alabama, looking pretty nice there. Just some cumulus clouds offshore of Dauphin Island, Alabama. A little on the hazy side in Cocodrie, and some sunshine today as you work your way westward over toward Galveston Bay. So again, on the satellite imagery here along the Gulf waters, you got a couple of areas of thunderstorms that are out here. This is really just some upper level energy that's drifting off toward the west, and also maybe a little bit of energy associated with a tropical wave that's now making its way westward off of the Central American Peninsula. It's kind of right in here, but all the energy is a little bit farther to the east, where we got some heavy downpours along the Honduran coast, Nicaragua as well, and that pushes farther south into the southern part of the Caribbean Sea. I do think things might start to get a little more active here over the next week or so in the areas of the eastern Caribbean or maybe the northern Caribbean into the Bahamas. So we're not going to worry too much about the tropical wave that's here over Central America. You got another tropical wave that looks like it's right about there, and you got another tropical wave that looks like it's kind of coming in here across the islands, but there's really not a lot of action there, so I'm not super concerned about what's happening in the Caribbean. For the next several days, I'm going to be a little bit more concerned about what's going on in the Atlantic, not just there between the Windward Islands and Africa, but also maybe off the east coast of the United States, as we've got a few fronts that are going to slide in. Nothing that would be in particular to worry about for us here in the Gulf. Anything that develops along a front along the East Coast this time around will probably pull back out into the Atlantic and really not have any problems. But we are looking at a number of tropical waves, one right there, one very vigorous one there, and another one that's out over Africa that's going to work its way out into the Atlantic here over the next couple of days. But really the one that we're going to focus a little bit more on today is this area here south of the Cape Verde Islands. This is going to continue to make its way off toward the west. It doesn't show a whole lot of development here in the next day or so, but it might have a chance 2 or 3 days down the road over the middle part of the Atlantic. Then it's going to run into some problems for a while, but then some of that moisture and energy could emerge closer to the northern Caribbean or maybe the Bahamas. And once it gets into that area, it starts to be a little bit more of a concern for us here in the United States. But I also want you to kind of check this out. You got a pretty good Saharan dust that's going to be coming off the African coast, following it kind of in tandem with this tropical wave. So as long as that dust doesn't interact with the tropical wave, it might have a little bit more of a chance for some development. At this time, though, the National Hurricane Center not showing anything developing here over the next several days, but the Euro tropical formation forecast. And what this does is it shows us between now and next Monday. So that would be what, Monday? Is that the 4th of August? Yeah, the 4th of August. So this would be any kind of tropical system that would move through or form. And the higher chances there are across the central part of the Atlantic and also, as I said, off the east coast of the United States. Not much of a particular worry here along the northern Gulf Coast, but those are the two areas that I think that we're going to be watching here over the next several days. I think there might be a low that'll come off a front off the east coast, and that would be forecast to move back off toward the northeast. And then this tropical wave, I'm going to show you this in the models. This is forecast to kind of take that track in that general direction and possibly move north of the Caribbean islands over toward the Bahamas. And you've probably already seen on social media, there are some long-range forecasts that try to put something in the Gulf waters. So again, that's a long way out and there's going to be a lot of changes, but this is what we start to look at as we're starting to get into August. So if you look at this map here, and then you compare this to where normally we would see tropical formation during the month of August, that's pretty much in the same areas there. So off the East Coast and then much of the Atlantic Basin too. So that is the area, or those are the areas rather, that we're going to kind of keep an eye on. Nothing to worry about here over the next several days. Unless you're listening from some of the Windward Islands or the Northern Caribbean Islands, you might be talking about this in about a week or so. But here in the U.S., or even in the Gulf waters, this is not going to be an issue until probably sometime toward the end of next week. So we're going beyond August 9th, August 10th in that range. So this, again, is the time to get yourself prepared. And part of the reason why you start to get a little bit more concerned this time of the year is if you've got some kind of a tropical system that wants to work its way in these particular waters, notice it's going through some areas that you've got some very high water temperatures. And these are just the surface temperatures that are running there over 80 degrees. These numbers are in Celsius, so anything over 26 is 80 on the Fahrenheit scale. So when you're looking at 28, 29, 30, 31, you're starting to push 90 degrees there in some of those waters over the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the tropical cyclone heat potential is sky high, and I also looked at some of the water temperatures and how deep that 80-degree therm goes, and there over parts of the Western Caribbean, these 80-degree waters go over 100 meters below the surface of the ocean, maybe at sometimes 150 to 200 meters below the surface of the ocean. So you've got a lot of high heat content there. If a tropical system works over these areas, it can tap into this. If it's out here, it might tap into some of the colder waters and not get that development or not get the fuel that it needs. But if you get something to start to track in these particular areas here, it's like running over premium fuel for a tropical storm or a hurricane to work with. And if you have the right atmospheric conditions, those are the areas that you're going to see rapid intensification. And you've seen this before over the past several years. And a lot of times those happen in the Gulf or the western part of the Caribbean or over here near the Bahamas. And that's why we're starting to get a little bit more concerned about where the models are starting to track some of these tropical waves. The wind shear is also starting to drop off. This is kind of a seasonal thing. As you start to get into August, we start to see the wind shear kind of relaxing a little bit. So a developing tropical system doesn't have as much of that energy working against it. So a tropical system can form a little bit easier, and a already formed tropical system would be in a healthy environment to strengthen as well. So as we go into August, you're really going to see the amount of wind shear starting to drop off. Now, we do have a friend in this, and that's the Saharan dust. And even with those tropical waves that are over the Atlantic, they're going to be battling a lot of this dry air and Saharan dust all the way across the Atlantic. So there is still a good chance that this will not develop into anything and just bring maybe some rains over parts of the Caribbean islands and maybe eventually westward over toward Florida and the Bahamas. But at this point, there are some models that are forecasting some tropical development. So we're going to start here with the GFS, and we're only going to go out 10 days. And the wave that we're watching, by the time we get to the early part of August, is right there. And then at the end of this loop, we see the concentration of moisture a little bit farther toward the northwest out here over the Bahamas. Going to let it run one more time. There's the wave that we're talking about. It may merge with another wave here by the time we get to the 1st of August. Then the system would be right about there by August 4th, which is Monday. And then by the middle part of next week, it starts to work its way into the Bahamas and perhaps over toward Florida. So at this point, the GFS is not showing any tropical development. Now, the Euro, the older Euro from this morning, we'll get a new run on the 12Z coming up, shows that wave, and then it kind of moves here by August 2nd, which is Saturday. And then as we get into the early part of the new work week, perhaps there's some of the energy there. And then toward the end of next week, you get a bit of a low trying to develop over the western Bahamas. So very similar to the GFS, not showing anything forming, but the general direction of movement would be just north of the Caribbean islands, heading over toward the Bahamas. Canadian model actually shows some formation for a while with that low. There it is right about there by Saturday, and then by Monday, it's right about there. And then as we head into the middle part of next week, this is about Wednesday, you see a little bit of a low trying to develop and perhaps work across Florida as we go into Friday of next week. So we're still talking about 10 days or so down the road. So the Canadian model actually forms this, but doesn't form it until very, very far down the road, which is actually very similar to the European model beyond 10 days. And I'm going to be showing you that in just a little bit. We'll finish with the icon, which is always a little bit more robust in developing tropical systems. There's the low there. And then by the time we reach the end of the weekend, it's there. And then by the time we reach the, let's say, Wednesday of next week, we've got some of that energy there, maybe a bit of a low trying to form. But on that particular run, it looks like there might be a trough coming off the East Coast, which would turn it back out into the Atlantic Ocean. So that would be great news for us here in the U.S., maybe not so great news for parts of the Caribbean and the Bahamas. So did want to take you, just because we're playing around with these long-range extended models, this is going out, this is the 10th day of the Euro, and if you remember, one of the areas that we were looking at was right here off the coast of the Bahamas, and you see that there is a little bit more moisture that's gathered there. So I kind of want you to pay attention to that area right there as we advance into that following week. So this is a week from Friday, August the 8th. This is going into August the 9th, which is not this weekend. This is next weekend. And then you see that little bit of a low, and I'm sure you've seen some of this on social media. So with that wave that's out in the Atlantic, the Euro actually gets some development about 12, 13 days down the road in the Gulf waters. And I don't know if you noticed this, but there's also another one that's in its wake off toward the east over Puerto Rico. So again, there is a chance that not only could we see some something getting into that area right around the Bahamas, but maybe something else could be developing there. Again, this is so far out that I can guarantee you this will not be the final solution. But as these models, especially the Euro, which is a little bit more trustworthy when it comes to tropical systems, when it starts showing returns like this or solutions like this, that's when you know you're starting to get into August and it is time to get yourself ready for the peak of hurricane season. Really, the next 8 weeks are about the busiest part of the hurricane season, so we've got quite a ways to go before things are going to wind down. Just a real quick visit out in the Pacific, off to the west, off of this particular graphic, there are a couple of tropical systems that are out south of Hawaii. We've got Iona, which is a hurricane, Kelly, which is a tropical storm. We've got another wave that might be able to develop. And then farther into the eastern part of the Atlantic, we've got some activity there that might end up with some development. Of course, that's no worries for us here locally, but just something to watch as hurricane season also continues over the Pacific. So remember, when we've got the models that are starting to throw things at us, or at least throw things out into the tropical Atlantic, sometimes numerous systems, you know you're starting to get into August and getting closer to the peak of the hurricane season. So again, you're kind of running out of time to be hurricane ready. These are a lot of things that are widely available across Acadiana. Most of these things you probably already have together. You just need to get into one place so you know where everything is. Kind of look over this list. This is just the very basics of what you can do right now to be hurricane ready as we start to head toward the peak of the hurricane season. So look at that list and see what you can do, and try to get yourself ready here before anything actually develops. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, turn on the notifications too. Remember, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. And also follow my social media pages on Facebook and X for any updates on any of these tropical waves over the next several weeks. And of course, thanks to all my new subscribers and my old friends here on Acadiana Weather Today. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Hope to see you tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock for Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. See you then. Have a great day.